Right, hello. Okay, this is a little example of this data mesh lab, basically. So I just wanted to show what it looks like to get started and bootstrap the project from a clean directory and a clean checkout. So we're going to create this new demo directory and then clone the Idea Labs repo into it. That's mostly the readmes and things of the various labs, and data mesh is a subdirectory in that, which has an install script. So we cloned it, we've CD'd into Idea Labs data mesh, and this is running the install K8s. So yeah, disclaimer, this won't work on Windows. This does assume a lot of stuff about your environment. It uses brew and things. It's all documented. You could just do the same. It's basically just booting up kubectl, a tool called K9s for it's a play on words for senior Kubernetes or K8s repo, and then Argo CD. So I ran install K8s, and I'm showing you that you can now browse to localhost 8080, and it spits out the password in standard out, and you can see that we've got a little web app for Argo CD, and this is what we use for our continuous deployment, which is the CD part. This is the bit that actually executes running software. So with that installed, we do install data mesh, and that's going to clone the various components for the data mesh lab. So in the documentation, you'll see we've got a service registry that components use to register themselves against, and there's a dashboard so that we can see the dashboard. There's a small backend for front end, basically server component for the dashboard, and a couple of example widgets. So there's a Pinot widget with a backend and a web widget. And I'm showing that we can go into K9s as well, which is a nice little UI to show all the different namespaces and the running pods. And we can see that's there. And when we choose to port forward one of those components, such as the dashboard, lo and behold, this is our very crude looking dashboard where, sure enough, it can show these two widgets and we can add them to our grid. So there's our kind test and our Pinot grid that at this moment are just really basic, little counter hello world kind of things. And, I can add some more Pinot grid widgets and put them wherever. But yeah, that's what's going to be our widgets. Cool. This next step, right, so we've got our grid going, we've got a couple of widgets. Now I'm going to the documentation on kind services for the Idea Labs, and we're going to create a brand new widget. So I'm just kind of browsing around, around the Idea Labs data mesh. When we drill down into the running section, this is showing you screenshots of what we've just done. And then it says, oh, how do you create a new widget? And we do that by using a template. You could do this yourself, but it's a lot more convenient to just have this nice little bootstrap template for creating a skeleton project of a new little widget. So this is going to stand separate from any of the other repos, and it's going to prompt us for what do we want to call our new widget. So I'm just calling it demo widget. It's giving us some defaults, but I'm overriding those, saying no, I want the name of my GitHub repo to be this and my image to be that. And you can see that it's CD'd into it and it's created some files now, given those inputs, given those overrides. And here in the docs, as I scroll through, you can see what they are, what those parameters do. But the second step says, okay, what do we do next? We have to create a GitHub repo. So I'm going to nick the name that I used when I set it up. In my prompts, I called it demo widget web, which is what I was going to call the packaged up stuff. So I'm going to paste this in here, and now we have a Docker Hub repo. So this is the place, Docker Hub. There's other places you can register containers, but that's what we're using to store our packaged up application. So our software knows how to create a Docker container. Docker Hub is where we're going to push those built containers to, and then in just a minute, we're going to then also need to deploy those containers. So we have some software that works. We've got a way of packaging it up. Then we have a place to push it, and now this is the GitHub stuff. Well, okay, where are we going to store the source code that knows how to push that repo? So I'm creating a brand new demo widget repo, just calling it demo. I'm going to do it in public, create repo, and those are the main bits. So I've got some source code. I've got a GitHub repo to store that source code online that has some actions to publish, and I've got a Docker Hub repo to contain the images. So I'm creating a new GitHub, or Git, sorry, instance. So I want to source control that code that we've just generated. I'm adding my origin to be demo widget that I just created. And now I'm just going to show, before we push things up, let's make a couple changes locally. So I'm just opening VS Code and showing you the make file. So this is all the code that got generated from that giterate widget. So it created, you know, some HTML and some build stuff and whatever else. And here we have some Svelte components. And I'm not going to go into Svelte, but it's just, you know, it's a fantastic little JavaScript front-end web framework thing. So out of the box, it just kind of, you know, it has no idea what we want to actually create. So it just creates a little naughty counter. So I'm going to, you know, I'm going to make the count go up by 2, and I'll change some HTML and things just to show that it's a little bit different from those other kind of naughty widgets that we've got there. So here's a few changes. I'm going to save those. When I go and refresh that in the browser, you can see that, you know, sure, oops, I need to refresh. You know, sure enough, there you go. You can see my count is going up by 2, and it's got those changes, and you know, there, good enough. You know, that looks like at least something different enough for our first change. So lovely, that's our widget. We can test it locally. That looks all right. Now let's just yeah, I've got a bit of work to do. You know, node modules shouldn't be checked in, so I'll ignore that. Otherwise, I'll check that. Okay, a couple of changes. Lovely, commit it. Commit some changes, and then finally push. So git push. This is going to take my local changes from my laptop and push them up to my origin that I added, which is GitHub, into the master branch. So when I go and look at that, I should see, instead of this thing that I just created, lo and behold, there's all my source files that were generated from that giterate template and with my changes, and I can see some changes building. Right, and at this point, I'm going to speed up the video a little bit, because what I noticed is, yeah, it's an old hang-up from GitHub. They changed the primary branch. It used to be called master. Now, by convention, it's called main. So when I pushed it up using the old defaults of master, what happens is it builds a build image. My GitHub actions basically look at the branch name and says, if it's anything other than the main branch, that looks like a repo build. You know, it's somebody's dev build or something. So I can see I've got a build in Docker Hub that was pushed, but it wasn't the primary branch. So I renamed the branch from master to main and push, and then it builds again. And now that it goes, oh, actually, you're not a branch, I'm going to build main. And all that means is it's going to tag the images different. It's going to use a latest tag, which is what we use in our Kubernetes YAML to say, this is what I want you to deploy. It's worth a separate conversation of why that is and things and how that works. But basically just know that things that get into the main branch that's kind of production ready. That's the branch we want to use to actually deploy and get things into production. Everything else is just used for dev code and that kind of thing. So yeah, I pushed it twice. It did a master branch, which is an old hang-up thing, called it main. And now in Docker Hub, when I refresh, I can see I've got a few builds now. I've got a build 1 and then a latest tag now and a build 2. That now those are what gets referenced from the Kubernetes stuff. You know, the Kubernetes is telling it how to go and deploy it. So that's my continuous integration. We've got some code, we packaged it up, and we built it, and I put it to Docker Hub. That's the continuous integration. Now this is the continuous deployment bit. So wonderful, how the heck do we get this back onto a dashboard? And that's where Argo CD comes in again. So there's a make install Argo that is just, that's part of the reason of using a template. It just creates that for you, and it should install itself on Argo. Again, I noticed it just needs to do some uppercase, lowercase stuff. I see here that it got a little error saying, oh, it's all in uppercase. You needed to have it called lowercase. So I'm just going to go into my make file here and fix that, and I'll fix it in the template. These things should all work out of the box. So let me just go into the make file, the build.sh. Right at the bottom is where it calls Argo CD to deploy it, and I can see the app is called demo widget, which is what I typed in when I created the new widget. let me just make that lowercase and something else, and that should fix it. So with that saved, and again, I'll want to push this up and commit it, but if I do make install Argo, sure enough, it's not there, it's at the top. There you go, demo widget, top right. Here's my new widget deploying itself, and it gives you a nice little branch of what this is in terms of Kubernetes components. It stopped port forwarding actually in this. It should just automatically refresh, and it would if this were on something other than local host, but I realize here, like, oh shoot, it should have just popped up in here. I'm going to go back into K9s, which shows me all the stuff that's now running in my Kubernetes cluster. So I can see my demo widget in there and the logs for it, which is super duper. But I need to go back into the data mesh web, or sorry, the dashboard web, and then do port forward again. Now that works, and now sure enough, there's our new demo widget that's in there, and we can add that, and we see our widget now in our list of things that we can add in our dashboard. And again, the main point is all this was done in separate composable repos.